I was in a place where I'm not going to say I wasn't happy with what I was doing, but before the podcast, we were just executing on work.
Yeah.
And I didn't have a voice, and I didn't think anybody cared what we were doing, and we were growing slowly. And then we start this podcast, and it just gave us a voice. And for us, it was amazing.
On today's episode of Rise, Grind, Repeat, we talk to Dustin from Motion Agency. He helps tech companies with their thought leadership by helping them produce their own podcast. Let's dive right in. Justin, thank you so much for joining on another episode of Rise, Grind, Repeat. I'm super pumped for this episode because, as mentioned right before this, you're just big into podcasting and using it to humanize brands and really, there's tons of values that come from podcasting that I think a lot of businesses don't realize. But before we get too deep into nerding out together over podcasting, I'd love to learn a little bit more about you and your company, Motion. So really, tell us all about your past and really how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, for sure. So I started my career in sales development. I was an SDR. Hammering away at cold calls in the tech space. And from there, so I worked at the time at a outsourced lead gen company. So as a services company, I found that interesting. I didn't need to have a tech background to start a business. Mm-hmm. And I kind of worked my way up there, ended up becoming a manager and a director level employee in my first job, and really got bit by the entrepreneur bug, but had this just kind of feeling that it would be valuable to get experience and exposure somewhere else. And I didn't even know what kind of business I would want to create. And so I left that company to go work at another services company where I worked for a video production company. So providing professional services again. And I had felt like when I ran toward my tenure at that organization that it was time for me to go out and try this on my own. And what I had learned was video production. So I left and started a video production company. I've never really used a camera before and decided I was going to start a business in that space and hired some people and did that for a while. And then at the beginning of 2019, I started a podcast. And I fell in love with the space. Very similar to video production in that you're creating content, you're capturing something. It requires some editing here and there, but very different in that I really was finding a way to get my own voice. I had always felt like on places like LinkedIn or where have you that, for better or for worse, people didn't really care what I had to say. I was some agency owner. Yeah. Then I start this podcast and I start interviewing heads of marketing and people whose voice does matter. And all of a sudden it gave my voice power. And people cared about what I had to say. And I found that amazing. And I wanted to go then do that for other people. And I pivoted my company, my business partner and I, to be a full service podcast agency toward the middle to end of 2019. And it was an interesting time to decide to start that. Obviously, we didn't know that a pandemic was coming, but now everybody is a content creator from their home, and we provide a service that helps people to do that.
No, that's awesome. Lots that you mentioned that have a few questions on. One, we're going through the whole business development process. We just started working on what does the automation look like, the touch points and all that, and I'm really feeling a lot of those roles. So, from an SDR perspective, I know this isn't podcasting, but what are the big pieces of advice that you have? Because I know that there's a lot of people that are trying to figure out this outbound game as well. So do you have any pieces of advice on how to approach just that whole outbound strategy? It's tough.
Well, yeah. So if we're talking about strategy itself, there's a lot that you can do there. I would suggest leaning on, some sort of sales enablement tool, whether it's, outreach or sales loft, and setting up a good cadence, trying to implement, some form of ABM strategy where you have target accounts. And I know that varies depending on type of company, what kind of accounts you're trying to break into. If you're more just on the cold calling side of it and, dialing for dollars, I think it's applicable to any piece of your life. Is just try to be interested and curious about the person that you're talking to. So, if you're doing cold outreach via email, doing a little bit of homework, really trying to find out who you're talking to. If you do get somebody live on a call, really trying to understand where they're coming from, who they are as a person, what they're looking to accomplish, and whether or not your solution can help to get them there. So that would be some recommendations on the outbound side. My business has pivoted a little bit away from that as we've really gone. And it's funny because that was, where I kind of started, but I've pivoted a lot more to more inbound strategies using content, just because the power of LinkedIn is there, the power of podcast is there, building your own personal brand and having people remember you for something is huge. And we're seeing more and more people having a voice on LinkedIn and caring about the platform than I've ever seen. I remember like 5 years ago, LinkedIn was not terrible, but it was a way to find out where people work and what companies were hiring. And there was just a bunch of garbage that was being posted. And now there's real content. People are creating real content in the tool itself, not linking out to a blog post. Like, they're just putting it right there. It's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Really, really good advice. And one thing I'm interested in is, what was the aha moment that, you mentioned very heavy in the outbound arena, then pivoted over to inbound. I love the inbound. We do video production, all that, to really, it closes a lot quicker and all that other stuff. But usually it's people are huge into either outbound or inbound. What was that thing that made you kind of see the light when it comes to inbound?
Yeah, for us, it was pivoting away from project-based work. We now offer podcast services on a monthly retainer. And so for us, it's all about lifetime value of potential clients. When I was heavy in outbound, it was probably similar to what you're talking about, which was, we were trying to get in front of anybody who had an active project, right? So I want to be in front of people anytime that they're thinking I might want to shoot a video. They think they get an email from me, they get a phone call from me or someone on my team. Whereas now we provide more of an overarching content solution. So there's not a project already there. It's, people are thinking about the podcast idea. Maybe they want to do it at some point, but people aren't like, I got to start that podcast project. That's what we're doing this quarter. It's a longer term thing. So for us, the aha moment was finding a solution that we could sell that was more of a solution than a commodity. And I sold commodity services for years. Yeah. Started out at that sales development company. At that organization, I moved into third-party recruiting. So I was a headhunter. Same idea as selling a video project. I'm trying to be in front of someone when they say that they're hiring, so that they hire me to find that person. Then I go into video production. All project-based. Yep. This is the first time in my life that I'm doing much more solution selling of selling something that solves the overarching content strategy need, and not so much like I need that thing. Yep.
You're helping build the ship rather than plugging up a hole on the ship. Essentially what it comes down to. And overall, it seems like, that's where the value is at, because it's, you're going to spend the same amount of energy and time closing them and educating them, but the value on the long term is probably more appealing. And so it's like, one, that it's not, for most people, it's not fun to hop on the horn and just outbound dial and send cold emails. And so from a stress and financial perspective, has that changed quite a bit on your guys' end? Is it easier to close deals? Are you guys being seen as more valuable as well?
Yeah, I think, and I can't say because I haven't A/B tested it. We really didn't reach out to people asking them if they wanted to start a podcast. This all happened over time, and we never launched a strategy to say, do you want to start a podcast? Because people may say, yeah, I was thinking about that. Maybe I do launch an outbound strategy at some point. But again, just very different than knowing you need to reach out to people to sell them a project that they're already thinking about. We're almost trying to sell people on like a way of life, which is make your life easier as a marketer by launching a podcast that does everything for you by recording, 30 to 60-minute episodes versus doing all of those individual things where you're hiring people and hiring firms or people or whatever to execute on that ebook, that blog post, that white paper, that video project. But that takes time and education. So I don't know that I could call a VP of marketing and say, so you should drop everything you're doing. You should start a podcast and it's going to change your life. They're going to be like, Justin, there's the door. Leave and don't ever come back. And that's fine. And so what we've done is we've used LinkedIn as our platform to try to educate the market on what a podcast can do for you as a business.
Yeah. And I absolutely love that approach. I mean, our clients, that's what we try and preach all the time is too many people are out there, buy now, buy this, sell this, and not educating. And the education leads to the sale that doesn't need some type of discount. So your margins are going to be a bit better. It ultimately just helps build that relationship a bit more. But I mean, when it comes to that aspect, I mean, what are the biggest things that you're educating on when it comes to LinkedIn and why companies should be podcasting?
I think the biggest thing that we're trying to educate is that a podcast and why you see so many of these, at this point, they're household names if you're in marketing, but why you see so many of these household names starting podcasts in just B2B is because it does so much for you. But explaining to people who've never done one that it's not the same as like, I'm going to have a webinar next month. It's more of a way of life where your podcast becomes the main piece that filters into everything else you're doing from a content strategy. Not everything. I mean, businesses are going to differ. Our clients are usually marketing teams of 1 to 5. I'm not talking about it's going to be everything for Salesforce.
Yeah.
Salesforce is going to have tons of different things going on. But when you're a marketing team of 1 to 5 and you can only spend your time and resources in select places, our belief is that if you start with a podcast and then turn that podcast into audio, video, written content. So you're getting your blogs written because they're about things that were being talked about in real time in your space on your podcast. You're creating video assets that are going to get published from that podcast. The audio is going to be on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, on your website. There's a ton that you can do without having to have 5 different people executing on different things, all getting paid different amounts. Start with the podcast and have it funnel into all these other things. But it just takes time to educate people on that. People aren't going to, they see it and they sort of feel it. They're like, oh, I see Dave Gerhardt has some stuff going on. I see Chris Walker's doing it, but it's like, they don't see the why and they don't fully understand why these people then get on their pedestal and are like, if you're not doing a podcast, you're missing out. But why are they missing out? What are they missing out on? What's the reason to do it?
And I mean, what would you say? Because I mean, I'm right there in line with you. You can sit here for an hour and do an episode. And from that, you get 15, 20 pieces of content from that single hour. And I mean, you try and do a project base and try and create 20 pieces of content. It's just going to be way more expensive than doing the podcast type of thing. But I mean, with all those, what are all the different ways in which after the podcast is done, that either the clips, the full episode, the different file types and all that, how are you guys using them for clients?
Yeah, for sure. So each episode gets turned into 8 to 10 pieces of content. So what we tell our clients is your job is to basically have a conference call. I mean, for better or for worse, you're having a conversation with somebody. It'll be a little bit more formal to start and then informal as it goes through. You're gonna have your intro just like you did today, and then you're gonna get into a conversation, have some fun, which I think is a big part of why when companies start doing podcasts that they want to continue doing them, is because it's a lot of fun to do in comparison to other things. But to answer your question in terms of the actual content that you get, so you get your edited episode, you get the transcript of the episode, which is an underrated and amazing thing. If you don't know about the tool Descript, you can basically throw any piece of audio or video content and get it almost spot on. It's fantastic. And then those transcripts are things that you can pull quotes and ideas out of that you can then create articles or blog posts or things for LinkedIn. So you've got your edited episode, which is audio. You got your transcript, which is written. We create 2 video audiograms out of it and 2 quote cards, which are images. So we've now got audio, written, imagery, video. We do a featured article or long form blog post for every other episode that we record, written again. So, you think about all those things, it's like 7 or 8 assets hitting on audio, video, written, and imagery, all out of one 30 to 60 minute conversation. If you were to go try and create those with contractors, you're talking about thousands of dollars for probably each of those assets.
No, that's awesome. And do you guys help them with the distribution side at all? Or do you guys give recommendations? So it's here, I got this plate full of assets. This is awesome. Now it's how do I get it in front of the right people? Do you guys help with that or have any recommendations or advice on that end?
Advice, yes. As a service, no. So I conduct weekly meetings with my clients, and I'm all about specializing, and I will give recommendations on what I know and what I do for myself. But if you're talking about, you want to launch some ads or something along those lines, it's just not my specialty. And I'm not going to try to fill that gap. But with that said, a lot of times my clients really like some of what I'm doing on LinkedIn or people who I interact with. And I give recommendations all the time. Big recommendations I have are to have your own thoughts on content that you're putting out. The days of throwing up a blog post that's written or an episode and saying, click here to listen to my show with Dustin, and people aren't going to interact with that. Use your platforms to give your opinions. My biggest piece of advice to people is that people do care about what you have to say. So many people feel imposter syndrome and are scared to write anything on LinkedIn because it might be taken the wrong way, or I won't sound smart, or people think what I'm saying is stupid. And I'll tell you this, even the smartest people out there feel that way. And they get nervous before posting something, and you'll be surprised what people have to say. So that's usually what I do with my clients is I give them either recommendations to people who are experts at things, or kind of give my 2 cents. But no, I don't do the distribution. So I'm that middle part that is, you deliver me, you don't even need to do anything. We record the episodes for them. And then once it's they're the host, but we take care of making sure it's getting recorded. Yep. And then we create all of the assets, all of that content for our clients, deliver it every week in a nice folder. So they are just getting tons of content that they can distribute in a variety of ways, all from one source, all from one place, and just making it way easier on them to have a very simple but effective content marketing strategy, especially when you have a team of marketers that's, you're a one-person VP of marketing, you manage nobody, and you're in charge of everything. And then people are like, hey, so I need you to not only make content in addition to all the other things that you're helping sales with, that you're setting up in HubSpot, that you're, building landing pages, all of that. In addition to all of that, I also need you to create a ton of content so that people think that we're a thought leader. And oh, by the way, I also want it to be like super interesting, cool, and fun.
Yeah.
And you get asked to do that, and you're just these folks want to just bury their head in the sand because it's like, where do I even start? And so we try to make people's lives easier by not having to worry about where is that next piece of content going to come from. Just jump on a 30 to 60 minute call and have some fun. And then we're going to turn it into a lot of different things.
I absolutely love it. Knowing your lane and staying in it, that's huge. And one thing that I would ask, you mentioned imposter syndrome. That comes up quite a bit. That's usually the pushback we'd love to recommend podcasts because everything that you're talking about is music to our ears. That's what we preach as well. But usually we end up with this all sounds good, but I don't feel comfortable getting in front of a camera. I don't feel comfortable. I'm just worried. What is the biggest piece of advice that you'd have to someone for that? Because I think there's a lot of people that want to start this, that see the value in creating more content, especially if it's not entirely video. It's less labor intensive to create podcasts and all that. But I mean, what would be the biggest piece of advice that you'd have for someone if they're wanting to make that leap but struggling to do it in fear of what others would say?
Yeah, the great thing about a podcast is you don't have to bring any insights. Not that you haven't brought any, Dustin. But, you've asked me a lot of questions, and you can be as involved as the host as you want to be. For me, what has helped me to build my voice as just someone who is comfortable speaking my mind now, which I wasn't before I had a podcast. I thought nobody would care what I had to say, and I didn't know what I wanted to say. And then I start this podcast, and two things happen. One is I'm leveraging the experts for my content. So nobody's looking at me. I'm basically the interviewer. If you see an interview with, I don't know why this is where my head went, but with Brad Pitt, what year, like 2003. But if you're doing an interview with Brad Pitt, nobody cares who the interviewer is. They're looking to hear from Brad Pitt. And so that's how you can view yourself when you start your podcast, is you're much more of a host or prompting questions. And as you get more comfortable, you can then, start to give your own insights. And obviously you've done this a lot, but, using your own insights and thoughts and what have you as you have that conversation. But the other great thing in addition to that is, after I recorded 100+ episodes with heads of marketing, you know how much information got pumped into my head? I'll go toe to toe with anybody who says they've talked to more heads of marketing at B2B tech and SaaS companies than I did over the course of a year. I mean, I'm not saying they're not out there, but we're a small group at this point. And I know that what I know comes from very smart people, and the education that I just inherently took in is pretty substantial. And that also helped with giving me confidence in my voice.
I love it. I can't wait to check out the podcast. I mean, you definitely know your lane and know the value of it. And so, I mean, it's huge. And we've been talking a lot about the content that gets produced, all the deliverables, all these assets. But I think one thing that a lot of people kind of miss in terms of the value is the relationships that it can build. How much quicker someone is willing to say, yes, let's hop on a podcast and talk, rather than like, hey, let's go to let's get coffee, let's do whatever. So, I mean, there's a lot from a business development perspective that I think expedites that sales process. Do you have any insights on that, or are you guys seeing that as well on your end?
Yeah, for sure. So for us, the podcast, we leverage 5 different personality types. And I'll finish on the last one that you mentioned. But customers are people who you would want to interact with, of course. Then you've got your internal subject matter experts. So people, who are at your company, who a lot of times are very difficult to get to contribute to content. You can just interview them. I hear from my clients so many times, and one of my favorite clients told us that people from our company are very smart, but they will never contribute to content. And I literally have them in line now waiting to get their podcast interviews done, because they all want to do it, because they think that the other people doing it was cool. And it's because I lowered the barrier to entry and didn't say, hey, here's a blank Word doc. I want you to write me a 1,500 word blog post on your expertise. And they're like, I mean, you're asking me to write my memoirs, like, thanks for that task. Versus, hey, instead of all of the crappy Zoom calls that you're doing all the time, we're going to have you do a recording. We're going to stick a microphone in your face. We're going to have some fun. And they're like, awesome. I get to create content. I get to look smart. And this is way easier. So we got customers, internal subject matter experts. A lot of organizations have partners. You can leverage your partners. So many times, our clients don't even think about the amount of people that they could have on. You got your industry influencers. And then, so the 4 I've said: customer, internal subject matter expert, industry influencer, partner, and then the last one is prospects. And you can use your podcast as a way to break into accounts that you're not currently working with, people that you find interesting, have interesting backgrounds that you'd want to potentially, start a relationship with. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that you bring them on your podcast and immediately it's like, so anyway, want to work together? But 2 things there. One is, I mean, you are a professional. And if you have an hour-long conversation with somebody and they say some things that you do find interesting and your solution helps it, afterward, it's okay to say that.
Yeah.
Hey, I heard a couple of things you said. I do want you to know my business does help in a couple of these ways. Wondering if you'd be open to that conversation. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. The other part is you're just establishing a relationship. You and I didn't know each other before this conversation, and I'll now interact with your stuff on LinkedIn and different places. So, it's a great relationship building tool with people that you know, and even with people that you don't know. People are excited. I would much rather have someone reach out to me and say, I want to feature you on my podcast, than I want to sell you, or I want to show you my demo.
Yep. Yeah, I know it's been a huge just networking opportunity. I mean, we started this just for the SEO perspective and really help give value to people that just might be starting off, not be able to afford maybe our services and all of that. But quickly we saw that, I mean, it just kind of evolved. And then from there, people started reaching out. Hey, I'd love to be on. And then after that, it was like, hey, this is a great way to start meeting other people. And I mean, ever since, Pedal to the Metal 2 years ago, it's just been a great way to meet really awesome people. I mean, usually we keep it pretty local here in Arizona, but with COVID, we've kind of, expanded the geo a little bit, and, making it virtual is a lot easier to do that. But yeah, I think outside of just the assets that you get that can help with the marketing and all that, I think just an awesome tool to just build more relationships in your space. I think that's huge.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it for us, it was the same way. I mean, I tell people all the time, I was in a place where I'm not going to say I wasn't happy with what I was doing, but before the podcast, we were just executing on work.
Yeah.
And I didn't have a voice, and I didn't think anybody cared what we were doing, and we were growing slowly. And then we start this podcast, and it just gave us a voice. And for us, it was amazing. It was amazing to be taken seriously. Not that I was ever laughed out of a room, but it was like, oh yeah, there's that vendor. And I went from that vendor to, there's a guy who runs that podcast. He's got a ton of awesome people on there. He probably knows a lot. And then I'm getting asked, hey, do you know, I'm getting asked by CMOs, hey, do you know anybody who's hiring? I'm like, man, you were like someone who wouldn't even have talked to me 6 months ago. And so it gave me power as a professional, and really did it changed my life and the life of my business partner, and changed our whole business model. And so you're not going to find much bigger of an evangelist for podcasting than with me. And it happened the same way it did with you. We started it. I didn't start a podcast thinking I'm going to one day be a podcast agency. Yep. I started it thinking like, hey, it's a cool medium, and maybe it'll be a good way to like create some content that people will want to engage with. And then it did a lot more than that.
Yep. And from that, I mean, once you got that idea, and this is kind of going back to I hand you a blank piece of paper, write me a 1,500 word blog. I mean, when it comes to thinking about what the podcast is going to be about, who am I going to bring on? I mean, I know you have those different audience segments and stuff, but I mean, how did you come up with what is it that we're talking about? I mean, you are super laser focused on what yours is and who that audience is for. Do you guys help in that ideation process with your potential clients, or do you kind of just give them the outline, here, you guys go think of it, and then once you're ready, we'll go ahead and produce it? Or what does that look like?
Yeah, we develop an entire strategy piece. It's the first thing that we do, where we identify who are going to be your guest profiles. So which buckets of those are they going to fall into? And then, the real thing is, you want to create content that the people who buy from you are going to want to listen to. So, if you keep that in mind, it does make it easier to come up with what exactly you're going to be producing and what the goal of your show is. So yeah, we definitely help with that. I mean, in terms of helping people to lock into who their ideal customer profile is. I mean, I've got some sheets on my website, and I can help people with that here and there, but it's not an offering that we do. For us, we're more like, who you want to talk to, or what you at a high level would want to say, and we make that happen, and we make sure that you have content to give to those people that they're actually going to care about. And I think that's a big thing is, and it's one of my first slides on my presentation that I give to people who are interested in our services. It's hard enough to create content. It's harder to create great content. Mm-hmm. Content that people are actually interested in and they want to listen to, and they're excited for that next episode of your show to come out, versus, all right, well, I guess I'm going to sit down and hammer through this ebook. And I'm not saying there's not a time and a place for that. There's a time and a place for everything, but that's not where we find ourselves. And what we found is, our clients have a lot of fun making this content that we make.
Yep. No, and I hear you on you don't help with the brand identity, brand voice, and all that. You guys help with the actual, what is it we want to talk about? I mean, because I think that's the second biggest piece that prevents people from moving forward is one, you have I'm scared to get in front of the camera or microphones. Once you get past that, it's like, all right, now what the hell am I going to talk about? How do you guys go through that and help identify to paint a clear picture? Because I mean, some of the conversation is just like, well, we could talk about this and this and that and that. I mean, what would you say, or what is your guys' process? I mean, without showing the secret sauce, I guess.
Oh, come on. I'm a content marketer.
Love it.
You want me to share my screen? I'll show you my presentation now. No. So, for us, we start off a little more rigid in our show format. We give our clients a roadmap of this is actually how long you're going to spend on your episodes. And these are the questions that you're going to ask. We want you to evolve, and we want you to grow out of the questions that are the questions that we gave you to get started. Mm-hmm. But we build you a roadmap for your first few episodes because people are nervous. You'll take people who are extremely talented, who have spoken to huge audiences, and they do get nervous on their first few episodes. And so we try to over prepare people with the intention that it can turn into a more free flowing conversation like you and I are having. So, I don't want to say to start it's cookie cutter, but, you got to crawl before you walk. You got to get comfortable behind the microphone. And then the hope is that you follow some sort of format, and then it turns into a pretty free flowing conversation.
Mm-hmm. No, that's awesome. Love that approach. And I mean, we've been talking a lot about the value of right now. You get a lot of assets from it. It's a great way to network and business development if you should. I mean, there's a lot of positivity now. People are also doing it a lot more. You're seeing a lot more podcasts come out. And I mean, for the people that are sitting there wondering, did I miss the boat? Or what are your thoughts on how podcasting is going to evolve into the future?
Yeah. One of my favorite questions, and I hope this isn't too hot of a take, and I don't mean it that way because I'm in this space. But I think podcasting is the new blog, and this isn't for individuals as much as I'm talking about for businesses specifically. I think every business will have a podcast within the next few years. Because I get that question all the time. It's like, oh, there's 3 other podcasts in my space. I'm like, yeah, duh, for a reason, because these people realize the value, and it's not just about how many listeners do you have to each episode. It's the amount of repurposed content that you get out of each episode, A, and B, the ease with which you can get it. My clients a lot of times are shocked at my ability to write. And they're like, wow, how are you able to write something in, the field of real-time data and cancer research? And I'm like, because I wrote it, but I had a 45-minute transcript where some of these extremely bright people just told me everything to write. What it does is it makes your life a lot easier. And so I think what's going to happen is the more and more people that realize that podcasting is a shortcut to a lot of the other content initiatives that you have, they're just going to stick and just be something that businesses just do. And so I think that just like every business, not every business, but most businesses have a blog on their site, like in B2B tech, I'm talking about more like SaaS type companies. They all have a blog. Eventually they'll all have a podcast because there's a reason that you have it. It provides for all of these different avenues of content. It's something that people care about, have fun with. And I think we're moving to a world where the only way that you really get left behind is if you just decide, I'm just not doing that.
Yeah. Do you follow Gary Vee at all?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a media company first. I mean, that's exactly what you're speaking to. I mean, every company should be producing that type of content, but I think I agree with you because it is so inexpensive compared to other mediums in terms of producing content and the quantity you get. I mean, the value is just insane across the board. And so, I mean, your recommendation is that people should just keep jumping on. I mean, right?
Yeah, I just don't see a world where, because I've heard that. I mean, is this, who's to say this isn't just like a fad or something that people are doing and it's going to go away and it'll be the next thing? And the answer is, the reason that I know it's not that is because it's not just that. The people who are executing on podcasts well aren't just doing it for the sake of the podcast. There's like 10 other things that are coming out of it. And this is just one medium to get all of that content. If it was just a podcast and he said, I just don't know how long people are going to want to listen to 45-minute pieces of audio, I'd say, okay, that's a much more fair debate point. If they weren't also getting written, visual, video, audio content all out of one place. If you're going to tell me that there's going to be some other medium where you can get all those things eventually, I mean, I'm all ears. But for me right now, I just see the sheer amount of content that comes out of it. You mentioned a guy like Gary Vee who talks all about distributing content in a variety of ways, places. You want as many eyeballs on everything as you can see. I don't know many other mediums that are going to be able to provide content in 10 different places in 4 different formats than this one.
Yep. No, I agree. And to your point, the people that ask, people going to watch this 45-minute episode, I get more excited not about the full episode. It's we go do the full episode because it's all the 1-2 minute clips that we can pull from it. And that's what people are really going to see that then lead to the full episode. But to me, we're seeing you're getting more value out of the clips and little micro pieces of content that you can produce rather than the full episode. You just kind of do the full episode because then it allows you to have the structure to then create all those little micro pieces of content that you can use for email and SEO, all that other stuff.
Yeah, for sure. It'd be like if I was a professional baseball player and I wanted to show my kid one day me playing baseball. I don't know that I would turn on a 3.5 hour game. That game is important. I'm going to keep it recorded and I'm glad I have it, but I'm probably going to show my at-bats. It's the same idea. That overarching flagship piece matters and you want to keep that and you want to house that, but then you want to extract all these little things and distribute them in different places.
That was a great analogy. I mean, that is a great way to paint the picture. It's like, yeah, we had the full tape, but you're not going to watch that. You're going to see the highlights of it. And I think
you're not going to delete it.
Yeah, exactly. You're still going to have it. I mean, and the people that do watch it, and we're huge on the paid media and distribution side. And to me, it's like you use the small pieces of content to get to the larger one. And then you set up audiences for people that watch half of it or the full thing. I mean, you got someone sitting through 20 minutes of 30 minutes of you talking. That's a super engaged audience that you can then retarget and drive awareness to the services that you do offer and all that other stuff. But, yeah, I think it plays a huge piece in the overall puzzle. But I mean, like I said, we've been talking a lot about the deliverables and all that. I mean, you guys help people from virtual, right? Or from out of state as well?
Yeah. We work with people all over the country.
So how do you guys do that and incorporate video? Do you guys give them like a not a gift pack, but like here's the equipment that you need to purchase in order for us to do it? Or do you have most people just run with their computer mic or their
Yeah, so we just have people get a Blue Yeti mic. Our podcasts typically don't incorporate the video function, which I know we're on right now. We, being that we were a video company beforehand, we have animators and motion graphics artists on staff. And so what we typically do is we make like audiograms. I'm sure you've seen them where they've got the captions and the photo and they move and live on LinkedIn or where have you that you're going to put them. For a variety of the reasons that you just mentioned, I look at your setup. It's awesome. I don't know that all my clients, when they get started, are going to do that. And so audio is just easier for it to sound very professional without having to make a huge investment.
Yep. Totally agree. And that's awesome. And we've been talking a lot on the podcast side of things, what's good now, the future of it. But for you guys as a company, I mean, what does the next 3 to 6 months look like for you guys? What's big on your radar? What goals are you guys trying to accomplish? And just what does that look like for you guys?
Yeah, for sure. So we've spent, and I really appreciate that you've said a couple of times that we're very laser focused. We've spent a lot of time and energy putting some thought into who we are and what we want to be and where we want to grow, because it all happened not necessarily by accident as much as just organically. There wasn't one day where we said, this is what we are now. We started to move into this podcasting idea. We launched our podcast. We really liked it. Then we, transitioned into this podcast company. And then who do we work with and why? And so we've gone through we brought on a consultant that helped us implement kind of a story brand approach to figure out who we are and what our messaging is. And so we've really honed in the last 2 months as to what our message is to the world, which I've kind of mentioned to you, which is heads of marketing at B2B tech companies with marketing teams of 1 to 5. My goal at this point, and because we're on retainers with monthly recurring revenue, my goal at this point, bring on as many of those as we can. Continue to we've created a great system for getting people launched and for executing quickly, efficiently, and their content looks great. And we have the bandwidth to bring on more. And then we want to grow the team that's on the back end and grow the team that's on the front end. And, who knows what happens one day. But what I can tell you is those are very attractive types of businesses to have on retainer as an organization. If one day I have 50, 100, 150 clients that are SaaS companies with 1 to 5 people, and I'm producing the majority of their content, puts us in a pretty strong position to do whatever we want. So, I think that's the goal is, stay. And that's what a lot of the focus has had to be around. It's hard to say, I don't do everything. And when people reach out, just yesterday, somebody reached out to me, previous client of ours, hey, we want to do this video together. And I said, we just don't do that anymore. I don't do one-off video projects. I appreciate it. I appreciate you thinking of me, but we're going in a different direction. We need to focus. We need to keep our eyes off of shiny objects and kind of on the mission, which is to provide podcasting services for those types of companies that I said. And so that's where we are. And, who knows what the future will hold at this point. We find ourselves in a pretty good industry during a pretty tough time where we're helping people to connect and to make content virtually. So, and unify, you and I, we wouldn't be able to go hang out right now and have this conversation over a coffee or beer or whatever, so this is where we are. And we help to get people to interact and create content together in a world where it's not that easy to do right now. So that's also been extremely rewarding.
No, it's awesome to hear. We're definitely behind you guys on that. It's something we're big on working on now is, as we've been ramping up on the business development and what is our strategy and really focusing on who is it that we want to serve and work with. Cause for the longest time, it's anyone and everyone. We're still debating on keep it that way or get laser focused. But as we're going through it, the biggest thing that has come up is who do we want to work with and what does that look like? When you're working with a consultant, what was the biggest thing that came out that created that clarity to hone in on your messaging and who you're wanting to work with? Because you guys have done an awesome job with it. And I'd love to see if there's any takeaways that I can learn from you guys as well as we're ideating through that.
So first off, it's terrifying to say, this is what we do and this is who we work with. As a business owner, the idea of somebody who was thinking about being a customer, deciding that they're no longer going to be a customer is a horrifying image in your head. You work so hard to get people to notice you, and the idea that they would take their business elsewhere because of something that you said is awful. With that said, the change in so we honed in on who our audience was more quickly than we honed in on who we were. So we went through 2 different iterations of working with 2 different consultants. The first consultant helped us to come up with who we want to work with. And that was scary. It was, okay, we want to work in tech. That's what we like. That's where I started my career. That's where my business partner started his career. And, we wanted to work with marketers. And so we kind of figured out this is what we're going to go after. And what we found was the people that we'd worked with before, didn't stop working with us because our messaging started saying who we worked with.
Yeah.
Then the issue, and the most recent one, was, what are we? Are we a podcast company? Are we a video company? Are we an all-encompassing content marketing agency?
Mm-hmm.
I've got all the tools in-house to create whatever you want. You want me to write you an ebook? You want me to create you a video? I got all that. So it was really hard for me to say, and I almost felt like it was belittling our skills to say we were a podcast agency. And what I found was I have more inbound traffic than I ever have because people know why to reach out to me.
Yep.
I can still sell all of those other services. I have companies who I build websites for. I have companies who I do videos for that started out as podcast clients. There's nothing stopping me from selling those other services, which is hard to wrap your mind around. But me going out there and saying, I mean, my LinkedIn tagline, what is it? It's like, I provide podcasting services that turn B2B tech marketers into marketing superheroes. I mean, it's clear as day. If somebody sees my name and sees me writing on something and they like what I had to say and they look at what I do, they're like, oh, he does podcasting. Great. If I ever need a podcasting guy, I'll definitely reach out to that guy. Yep. There's no confusion around it. My headline of my website says, launch a podcast for your tech company and become a marketing superhero. No confusion. It's very clear what we do. And so people are driven to work with us. So at first, sure, it's scary. You're worried people are going to turn away. But what you're really doing is giving people confidence to reach out to you because you seem like an expert at something. People know now why they reach out to me. They know when, they mark me down, and then they do it. And I've had more inbound inquiries in the last 2 months than I ever have in my entire life.
That's awesome. I mean, it's, the fear of saying no, you're going to miss out on opportunity. But in fact, by saying no, it shows you're laser focused and why people should work with you. So they have the clarity in what you do, which actually brings in more opportunity. It's tough. I mean, it is always tough. And like I said, we're debating internally on how we want to approach it, but it's, I see the pros and cons of everything. But I mean, as you're mentioning it, you give not only yourself clarity on who you serve and what problems you solve, but you also give someone else that clarity, which then makes it easier for them to want to reach out. I think the biggest thing that prevents people from reaching out is not having clarity or understanding the why. And once you can show that, it expedites that. Yeah, I want to reach out and work with them.
And so before we launched this brand story brand exercise with this consultant, his name's Danny PV. He was fantastic. Our website copy read, we launch thought leadership programs for B2B tech companies. Not that much different. And it's what we did. I mean, we would do video, we would do podcast. Mm-hmm. The problem was nobody knows what a thought leadership program is. People know what a podcast is, but I had this thing there that was like ambiguous because we didn't want to put ourselves in any specific bucket or category. And so when I have that as my headline, literally nobody knows why they should reach out to me. Nobody's sitting there going, I should launch a thought leadership program.
What does that even look like?
People, what the heck is that? Yep. It was an idea I had that was like, that way we can kind of pivot into whichever direction we think fits. We can help with whatever. It could be video, it could be audio, what have you. We can maybe help people build websites. They'll figure it out. They won't figure it out. Having clear brand messaging and having a specific thing that you do, now people know when I need a podcast, those guys are the podcast guys. I will reach out to them. And so we've found a lane for ourselves where people can associate us with something. And that has been a pretty big game changer for us.
No, that's awesome. I mean, that from last couple of guests, that seems to be the reoccurring theme. Give yourself clarity. It gives potential customers clarity, which then those potential customers turn into customers. And so that's awesome. And appreciate it. Cause like I said, it's, we're working hard on trying to figure out our direction and pretty sound advice. I really appreciate all the thoughts that you've had. I mean, as we kind of wrap up, as we've mentioned, there's a lot of people that are thinking about starting a podcast, wanting to start a podcast. I mean, what's the biggest piece of advice that you'd have for anyone, even outside of the B2B, just anyone that wants to create more content, get their voice out there and just get the ball rolling? What's the biggest piece of advice that you'd have for them?
Yeah, I mean, I would take a look at what you're doing right now and try and figure out if there's a better way to do it. I just see so many people. You're working with 5 to 10 different contractors. You have 2 people in house. Everybody's being pulled in a million directions. Try and find some medium where you can create content and then repurpose it without having to recreate the wheel each time. I mean, if you write something that's good, repurpose it in a variety of ways, leverage audio. And I'm not saying to launch a podcast with me, but if you want people internally to create content, record them using audio and then use that audio to write a blog post, push that out. Maybe you turn it into some sort of infographic type thing. Just do more with less. There are so many tools out there that can help. That would be my biggest piece of advice to anyone who's looking to make content and do a better job with it.
I absolutely love it. I think our mind frames are in the same spot. I mean, you got the content sponge, wring it out as much as possible and repurpose as much as possible. But no, this has been great. I mean, if someone does want to reach out and, want to start a podcast or even just get in touch with you, how can people find you or reach you?
Yeah, so LinkedIn /Justin Brown Motion. That's where you can find me there. And then you can just go to our website, motionagency.io. And there's a ton of stuff there. If you're interested in doing a podcast, you don't necessarily need to start with a conversation with me. We have a build a podcast plan resource page. I've got a 15-minute video there running through how you can do it, why you would do it. There's assets there, a ton of stuff that we put there because we know this is a new medium for people. They're trying to understand why should I do this? I know I'm being told I should do it, but why? And so you can go check that out without having to talk to me.
That is awesome. Make sure to go check it out. And Justin, I really appreciate your time, and I look forward to continuing to follow you and just see you hit your goals and continue that growth. So appreciate it.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.